our culture, man, it gives you a desire to do even more of that, but it's a little late in life.
Yeah, a little late in life. But it's also a little bit of a sad commentary for our country in that the decent person, the person that really desires to do right and to serve and to help, is not willing, understandably so, to quite frankly put themselves out front or their family in a situation like that where they would take so much abuse, and hence we have a lot of less than desirable candidates that are willing to do so because they don't really care, maybe so.
Yeah, well, that seems to be that whole concept of risk seems to be very important. The other thing that I see here is just a lot of independent guys. I mean, these are, even if you look at your movies, it's like Napoleon Dynamite's just sitting there all alone by himself, and you know that of him, right?
Yes,
He's independently minded. He might be alone in some way, but he's there. You see Forrest Gump by himself. You see Jeremiah Johnson, Cool Hand Luke,
Steve McQueen in Lamar.
Waiting for Guffman. So it seems like you have this. You really love movies where the people are themselves and they're kind of sticking out and being independent and very much their own person. Is that true?
I think I'm just living vicariously through these characters.
Oh, that's what I'm hearing constantly. But I have to believe it's something about you. Would you say, Bryant, that there's anything about that as far as him?
Well, I want to say this. I know this is Scott's time. Nothing like his older brother in certain some here, but I certainly understand Steve McQueen.
Oh, do you?
And the car race being on here because one of the maddest I've ever seen Dad. And I missed a lot of Scott's childhood when I went off to college, but he came up with the idea of leaving Carolina and going and taking all that money for tuition for a weekend of race car driving training in Germany or somewhere in Europe. Just
really?
And I thought my dad was going to come unglued asking for that. So, by the way, Dad did not give in to that request. He had to go back to college, not to race car.
This
but
was
at
a
least
good story.
I asked.
Yeah, that's right.
At least I asked.
The risk taking. Yeah,
that's right.
There it is.
But it is interesting because Bryant's correct in that I love automobiles and I've always loved car racing, and I actually was able for a few years to live out my dream and actually race cars for a period of time. I look at 12 Angry Men. That's one of the greatest movies of all time because you've got 12 individuals that are thrust into a room.
Yeah.
They know nothing about each other, and yet you have one person that seems to rise
one person
to the top.
Again, I'm just saying.
That's right.
Thinking independently, I'm just saying.
That seems to rise to the top, and with calmness and dignity and gentlemanness, like if that's a word, bring these other 11 together so that they come to a consensus and a decision on a trial.
Yeah.
And in just the 12 different personalities and how they interacted with each other and what came out of those personalities, and yet he was the one person that kept them all together.
One person. So would you say that a Cool Hand Luke, it's the same
he's
kind
one
of thing?
He's one of the coolest dudes ever. I don't aspire to eat as many hard-boiled eggs as he did, but the fact that he was single-minded, he had a way about himself that it just doesn't sound real positive, but he didn't really care what other people thought about him.
Yeah, well,
he was his own man,
right?
And he just wanted to do it his way. Yeah. It may not have always been the right way or the best way, but nevertheless, it was never in doubt. It was his way.
Yeah, so, Brian, I want to hear from you on that. When you see your brother's films, and I see these very independent, people who are self-confident in who they are, and yet oftentimes these people bring people together because they're confident in who they are. How do you see that in your brother? Do you think that's there?
I think it's a great understanding of Scott because here's a guy that now has his own company, and yet I don't know of anybody in the business community in Atlanta. I know I'm biased towards Scott, but that is more respected or better networking, within the Atlanta community. I mean, I just continually run into folks in the Atlanta business community, obviously most of all in the real estate world, but just such great respect for Scott. But he has got his own company.
So he is, yeah.
I mean, he's not there serving in a large corporation, although he learned his skills there and benefited greatly, I'm sure, from your time with Carter and others. But he's always kind of been his own man and now thriving in a bigger community, but as the single guy versus the big boys out there.
Yeah.
although he learned from them and really did well when he was in that setting as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've known Scotland for not as long as you, but I've known him long enough to know that people love him because he is his own man.
That's right. Very respected.
Yeah.
I just continue to hear from folks about how much they respect Scott and how he does business, and thinking of all the things that Scott does behind the scenes with different ministries.
Yeah.
And put in a leadership role time and time again in different ministries. I think Scott would tell you he doesn't necessarily prefer to be the guy up there preaching the sermons.
Yeah.
But he is the guy making things happen in a leadership role behind the scenes, whether it's in the North Point Buckhead culture or whether it's a ministry like yours or many others that he has been very supportive of.
Yeah. Yeah. He's doing the dance for Pedro.
That's
campaign.
very nice. Very nice.
Yes.
You know, the other interesting thing, too, I'm finding out a little bit about myself is, believe it or not, in our family, you know, you had to, there was a lot of strong individuals in our family. So you had to kind of be very assertive and persistent in making your way.
Yeah.
But I was not the most, I was not the child or the sibling that talked a lot. Growing up, I was more of.
So you were the cool hand, Luke.
Well, I was more on the quiet side. People would find that hard to believe today, but I was more on the quiet side. And looking at these films, you have a lot of people that say a lot without being loud or saying a lot.
Yeah. Their actions
Gregory
speak.
Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird. Steve McQueen may have said 10 words in that movie. Jeremiah Johnson out there in the woods all the time. Henry Fonda in 12 Angry Men, how he calmly brought that group together.
Yeah.
Paul Newman in Cool Hand Luke. So anyway, that's kind of an interesting theme there.
Well, it seems like, and this is what I'd like you guys to both speak on, is it seems like there's two things I see that are very strong in both of you. One is being very principled. It seems like yours is definitely around being your own man and being principled, and so there's the principle aspect of things where people are standing up and are not afraid to kind of be themselves to stand up. They're doing things for people who are oppressed in some way, or people who are on the fringes in some way. Both of you share that in a way too, right? It seems like Scotland and yours. Obviously, you share it in To Kill a Mockingbird and Forrest Gump, but you see that also in Napoleon with Pedro. You see that. Which of these other ones would you say that for too?
Could I respond to that?
Yeah.
I think Scott and I have been blessed with extraordinary parents, and I think they drilled in us of remembering the little guy. Remember that our family has been amazingly blessed. And blessed in so many ways. And yet they constantly drilled in us to seek out that person in your class that nobody likes. To speak up for them when others are jumping on. They were really, I remember how my dad just really reamed me over the coal a couple times when I did not give a friendly greeting to someone or acted disinterested in someone because it maybe was someone I wasn't interested in. But he was really strict. You don't treat people that way.
That's
you treat
awesome.
Everyone with respect, and that's definitely been drilled into our family and our psyche big time, because our parents are what you call classically beautiful people. I mean, really, physically. Relationally, I know we're biased, but really, they are. I think anybody that would know our parents would say, "Yeah, that's how they are."
I agree.
But they wanted to be sure that we looked after the little guy and had a sense of responsibility, because Mom said many times, "To whom much is given, much is expected." And they knew we were being blessed. And so they wanted us to remember that.
That's so well said, because I agree 100% with what Brian said about our parents and what they instilled in us as children, and rearing us to be adults and treating everyone as equals from the standpoint that regardless of their stance in life and position in life and whatever their job may be or whatever it is that they might be going through, but just be kind to them, a simple hello, and maybe a compliment or whatever, but just something that engages that person. And it's actually kind of fun to see how people respond, because oftentimes they respond like, this not really had anybody acknowledge me in that way kind of thing. And it's fun to be an encourager in a soft way like that. But it's also a very strong statement, oftentimes to the recipient that's hearing those words.
Yeah.
And so that's one reason that Kill a Mockingbird stands out to me so much, is because you have this very principled individual who is very strong in his position, is going against a lot of things that are wrong and evil, and stands up to them, even when he knows the outcome is probably not going to go his way. And also seeing how his children, how Scout and responds to their dad and looks at him and looks at him with respect. One of the greatest scenes is when he's standing in the driveway and the dog with rabies is coming down the street, and the sheriff is there to shoot the dog and put him out of his misery and save the town. And the sheriff says, "I can't shoot him, Atticus. You know I can't shoot. I'm not very good," and that kind of thing. So Atticus reluctantly takes the gun, and of course he's been what's the son's name? I'm drawing a blank. Not Scout, but
I forget.
Jim. Jim had been wanting a gun for Jim was either 10 or 12 at that point. For his whole 12 years, he's been wanting his father to give him a gun. Never has, and he never knew this about his dad. And his dad took that shotgun or the rifle, and with one shot, took his glasses off even, and with one shot put the dog down. And how Jim looked up at his father was just like,
cool
wow.
scene. That's a great
My dad really can do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That was really neat. And that's the way Bryant and I look at our dad. He's one of the coolest men ever, of incredibly strong faith, but principled, wanting to do the right thing, and treating people
with dignity.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, let me ask you some questions as far as both of you are concerned real quick. So which one on Scotland, you didn't get a chance to talk about his top 10. So when you saw when you saw Bryant's top 10, how did you go, "Oh, that's so like him"? And based on our conversation, was there anything that we were kind of teasing out that you went, "Yeah, that's totally him"?
Well, I did not realize the aspects about Patton so much, and he did have to turn in his man card on Sound of Music. But is what I found in listening to Brian, and what I already knew about him, quite frankly, was that he is a leader and a great leader, and all of these movies represent very strong leadership. When I look at the list, I see very strong leadership. Even with Forrest Gump, he may not have known he was being a leader, but he was. There were people lining up behind the guy.
Yeah,
he didn't even realize it.
They followed him on jogging.
Yeah, they did.
They did
faithfully. Yeah. And then he decides, I'm not going to run anymore. I'm going to go home. But anyway, but Brian is a great leader, and I think of myself as being a leader, but a much different style.
Yeah.
Because Brian has to put himself in front of people all the time, and quite frankly, I do as well in a business professional sense, but not where I'm up front making public talks to large groups. Do that occasionally, but not every Sunday like he does.
Yeah.
And more than that. So both leaders, but different styles.
Yeah, totally. So which one surprises you, Scotland, that's on his list?
Well, I just have to admit the Sound of Music kind of surprised me.
So you're really surprised by it?
Yeah, I really was.
Yeah.
It's just not one that I would have thought until after he explained that would have been on that list.
And how about you, Brian? Which one surprises you that's on his list?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say that I don't know what Waiting Guffman is
Waiting
about.
for Guffman. You're missing out on one of the greatest all-time comedies in the world.
So tell the world what Waiting for Guffman is about.
Waiting for Guffman is based in this small town in Missouri, where there's this supposed New York Broadway producer, director is supposed to appear, and they try to put this play together about their town, the history of their town, and the characters that are involved are so quirky and so funny, and watching this small town production come together in hopes that this New York bigwig is going to come in and find them and take them to Broadway. And just the storylines around the individuals and the group as the players as a group is just really, really funny.
Well, are you asking about the character of Scott?
Yeah.
Well, here's an aspect that probably folks don't know about Scott.
All right, bring it.
But Napoleon Dynamite brings out a side of Scott that he's probably not displayed within the business community.
Oh, really?
When our family gets together, there can be some really goofball humor that takes place, but I think only within a family, you
That's
completely let down your hair. But I think really Steve McQueen probably is the one that Scott would, because I mean, has he